We built over 150 AI agents under the new Agents as a Service model in the last 9 months. In this video, I'll share with you 26 key takeaways that we had to learn the hard way that costed us a lot of dissatisfied clients' time and money, so you don't have to repeat our mistakes. Let's dive in. Key takeaway number 1. AI agents are not your employees. Today, everyone still seems to call AI agents either automations or your own employees. And unfortunately, agents are neither of those things. You see, the difference between agents and automations is that in automations, every single step is hard-coded for you, which means that you know the exact steps and the sequence of those steps in advance. While the difference between agents and employees is that agents have less autonomy than employees, meaning that typically you need way more agents than you need employees. Agents require training on the exact instructions in order to perform a process manually. They can't just take a look at your SOP and then go out into the world and learn by themselves using trial and error. Unfortunately, not yet. So instead of thinking about agents in terms of roles, I believe you should actually be thinking about agents in terms of SOPs. Typically, one agent can handle one standard operating procedure well, while one employee typically handles 5 or more SOPs. Which brings us to our key takeaway number 2. Start from well-documented processes. SOPs are standard operating procedures. These are the processes that employees perform in a given business. And in a good business, these processes are typically always well documented. So by finding these well-documented processes first, you can make training an agent significantly simpler. Instead of collecting all of the data manually, instead of asking tons of questions from your client, you can simply take that SOP and most likely it will have everything you need in order to train this agent to reliably perform this process. So find these onboarding materials, find SOPs first, and then go from there. Key takeaway number 3. Business owners will never build their own agents. I believe that even when we have agents that build other agents from a single prompt, business owners will still never build their own agents. Just like no-code tools promised us the end of software developers, but instead simply started a wave of no-code developers, and just like automation platforms promised us the end of backend engineers, but instead started a wave of automation engineers, AI agent platforms and frameworks that can build other agents will only spike the demand for AI agent developers. As OpenAI and other labs keep releasing new agentic capabilities like the operator and the deep research agents, it's not building agents that will be the hardest. It's determining which agents to build, which is exactly where AI agent developers come in. So don't worry about agents building other agents. Business owners will always prefer to entrust this to someone who knows how to work with AI agents best, even when the process becomes extremely streamlined. Which brings us to key takeaway number 4. Business owners have no idea which agents they need. A lot of our clients, when they start their subscriptions, come to us with some ideas for which agents they want to build, but in around 50% of cases, this is by far not the most valuable agents that we can build for that business, which is why consulting is a huge part of our service. So to determine which best agents to build, we typically prefer to start from a customer journey. We ask our clients to help us map out their customer journeys on Figma with us step by step, and this gives us a great idea on which specific parts of that customer journey we can automate. So then if we see that there is a potential opportunity there, we can dive deeper into that specific part of the process and then maybe even map out that process by itself. And by doing this, typically you can find opportunities that are not only easier to build, but also bring significantly more value to that business. So don't listen to your clients if they have some ideas for which agents they want to build. Use it as feedback. don't assume that this is the best possible idea that you can integrate into their business. Which brings us to takeaway number 5. You don't need 20 plus agents. You see, right now on YouTube and in our community, people seem to be building as many agents as possible. And what this typically does is it only makes your systems more complex. By adding so many agents in a single system, you simply make it harder to maintain. It becomes increasingly more complex to debug the system and to find potential issues. Additionally, it increases costs and the amount of time it takes for your agents to provide a response. So start with as few agents as possible. Preferably start even from one smallest agent that you can deliver to your client as fast as possible. And then once this agent is fully fine-tuned, once you actually had a chance to deploy this agent and once the client has tested it, then you can proceed to add in more and more agents as needed. Which brings us to key takeaway number 6. Data drives decisions, but data with actions deliver results. You see, there is a saying in data science called GIGO, which stands for garbage in, garbage out. And this still holds true for AI agents. If you provide your agents with trash inputs, they're going to produce trash outputs. However, what we discovered just recently is that the biggest impact doesn't come just from adding data to an agent. It comes from combining that data with relevant actions together. By combining knowledge, like for example, how to create effective Facebook marketing campaigns with actions that allow this agent to control Facebook marketing API, you can achieve significantly higher results than by using either data or actions alone. By combining knowledge and data, the agent is not just executing tasks, it can actually provide you with the suggestions on what exactly you could improve and how to perform that process best. So make sure to scrape both internal and external sources. This will significantly increase your agent's performance. Which brings us to key takeaway number 7. Prompt engineering is an art. Honestly, prompt engineering is already a real job, even though many companies still don't recognize it as one. And as these models become larger and smarter and are evolving to run for 10 minutes or more, prompt engineering is becoming more important than ever before. So right now, prompt engineering is already like an art. You have to write your prompts like you would be writing blog posts or essays. You have to think carefully about every single word you put in that prompt, because again, as the models get smarter, prompt engineering will become more and more important. So here are some tips for writing effective prompts. Tip number 1, provide examples. Make sure you provide enough examples to an agent, because often one example is worth 1,000 words. Number 2, order matters. What we found is that actually the order of your sentences or paragraphs in your prompt makes a large difference. From our agent developers' experience, we often had agents where simply by rearranging the prompt, the performance of the agent went from completely unreliable to consistent and reasonable. Make sure that the most important parts of your prompt are at the end of instructions, not at the beginning, because large language models remember information that's closer to the latest message better. And the last tip is iterate and test constantly. Oftentimes, the only way you can determine whether your prompt works or not is by iterating and testing it. So do not modify your prompt without testing how it affects the performance of the agent. Make sure you run your agent as often as possible and then adjust the prompt accordingly. Which brings us to key takeaway number 8. Integrations are just as important as functionality. Oftentimes, we tend to overfocus on the agent's capabilities. However, integrations, which is where the agent is working, are oftentimes even more important, because if it's not convenient for your users to use an agent, doesn't matter how powerful your agent is, it's still not going to be able to provide any value. So again, make sure that you integrate your agents into the same exact systems that your employees use daily. If you are building a customer support agent and your client currently uses Zendesk, the agent must also work in Zendesk as well. Which brings us to key takeaway number 9. Agent reliability has been solved. So today, a lot of startups are trying to solve agent reliability, but in our agency, if the agent is not reliable, it's not the agent problem, it's the developer problem. And the person who is responsible for solving agent reliability is named Jason Leo. Back in 2023, he released this legendary video called Pydantic is all you need. And he also recently posted an update, and guess what? Pydantic is still all you need. Essentially, he figured out that you can use Pydantic, a data validation library, to validate all agent inputs and outputs, which means that if you added all the necessary validation logic, the agent literally cannot screw anything up. It cannot take any action that would cause any major consequences because it should be prevented by the developer who was developing this agent. So make sure to check out this video, make sure to check out how it's implemented in his library instructor and in my framework, because honestly, with Pydantic, you can even now build agents for literally any use case. Which brings us to key takeaway number 10. Tools are the most important component. When it comes to building AI agents, there are 3 most important components, which are instructions, knowledge, and actions. And around 70% of work in our agency goes into building actions, which are the tools. Why is that? Well, because tools is how agents provide value. You see, with standard chatbots or LLMs, the value is generated through responses, while agents generate value through actions. Agents must execute tasks. They shouldn't just tell you what you need to do or simply provide a response to your query. Agents should actually do that thing for you, which is why actions are the most important component. If you know how to build and structure your tools well, you can literally build agents for any use case. Which brings us to key takeaway number 11. No more than 4 to 6 tools per agent. This is our rule. Right now, we are not adding more than 4 to 6 tools per agent, depending on their complexity. This has proven to work the best in our AI agency, although of course it does depend on the complexity of your tools. Right now, with at least GPT-4o and Claude 3.5 and latest GPT models, you can't add more than 6 tools because the agent simply starts to hallucinate. The agent starts to confuse which tools to use or what's the proper sequence for using these tools. This is a really good rule of thumb. If the agent starts to hallucinate, you need to split this agent into multiple agents. Key takeaway number 12. Model costs don't matter. Recently, DeepSeek made a lot of noise, and it's certainly impressive what they have been able to achieve in terms of costs, but honestly, we stopped caring about model costs a long time ago. If your use case makes sense, you will almost always make a tremendous ROI from using an AI agent compared to performing the same process manually. If you simply focus on the right thing, then you no longer have to worry about costs. So check out my previous video with 5 agent case studies where, for example, for one agent, the process for filing questionnaires was reduced from $300 and 3 days manually to $1 to $2 and about 20 minutes. Which brings us to key takeaway number 13. Clients don't care about which model you use. Many people are typically surprised when they hear that we never used an open source model in our agency. Businesses don't really care about which model you use as long as your use case makes sense. If you can provide them with value without violating their customer policies, then they don't really care about what model provides that value. So in case if our customers do have these strict data privacy policies with their own clients, what we do is we simply use Azure OpenAI, which essentially runs OpenAI models in your own private Azure instance without even sharing data with OpenAI itself. OpenAI is still our provider of choice because of their developer experience. It saves us a significant amount of time on developing agents because of how convenient it is to work with their API, which does significantly simplify the agent creation process. Which brings us to key takeaway number 14. don't automate until value has been established. Although we do work primarily with existing businesses, sometimes we get people who come to us and they want to automate a business that doesn't even exist. So they want to build a process, not from establishing this process manually first and then automating it, but from guessing that automating this process will make more value. So in my opinion, this is extremely risky because you don't even know if the process is going to work at all, and it's going to require a significant investment. Typically, it's the development costs that you need to worry about rather than the model costs. So the development cost is where, the solution might not make sense, which is why you need to first establish value for a given process. Maybe you even might want to hire someone on a platform like Upwork and ensure that the process actually works. And then once you determine how the process should be executed and that it actually provides value, you should automate it with AI agents. Which brings us to key takeaway number 15. Don't think about use cases, think about ROI. And the formula that we use to calculate ROI is as follows. On the top, we have rate times amount of hours minus the operational costs divided by the development costs. So the rate times amount of hours means the rate of an employee currently performing this process times the total number of hours that all such employees take for performing that process. So it doesn't mean that it's just one employee. It can be multiple employees because the number of employees definitely does affect the value of a given process. And the operational costs are typically just the model costs and the server costs, which in our experience, again, are pretty much negligible. The development cost is how much it takes you to develop your solution. So let's say that, for example, an employee performs a process for $50 per hour and they spend on this process around 10 hours per week. And the development costs for this process for us are at $5,000. So let me calculate this right now. So a year later, the ROI for this process will be at around 5.6, which means that the client has made 5 times the return on investment 1 year after we built it. So again, only focus on what provides the most value for the business. Which brings us to key takeaway number 16. Agent development is an iterative process. In data science competitions like Kaggle, where people design and train custom models for various purposes, it's typically the team that has tested the biggest number of parameters and different model architectures that wins. And the same applies to AI agents. I often get questions like, how do you know how many tools to add per agent? How do you know how many agents you'll need? And the answer is, most of the time, you simply need to try it. You need to try as many different architectures as possible and then compare them side by side to see which one wins. Only after you've had some experience building agents, you'll start to see which architecture makes sense for a given solution. So next time you are confused or your agents are underperforming, make sure to build a couple of variations and test which one works better. Which brings us to key takeaway number 17. Use divide and conquer approach. Divide and conquer is essentially breaking down a complex problem into manageable tasks. We use this approach for almost every single agent. You need to be able to deliver solutions incrementally. So instead of building an entire solution and then realizing that this is not what the client wanted, make sure to split it into manageable components and deliver each component one by one. So find an agent in a whole system that can work by itself, build that agent first and deliver only that agent. And only after, again, the client has confirmed that this agent works, proceed to building the entire system. The same should apply to what you automate in a given business. Like, for example, we'd like to automate by departments first. So we like to focus on a given department first. We like to try to automate as many solutions in a given department as possible before transitioning to the next department. This allows us to then possibly combine some agents in that department together, which will make our system significantly more powerful. Key takeaway number 18. evals are a big deal, but only for big companies. Evals are essentially evaluation metrics that you set up for your agents to track their KPIs and performance over time. Evals can be extremely effective to completely eliminate your competition because they will allow you to continuously improve your solutions over time. If you have set up correct evals, it means that anytime you deliver a similar solution to a new client, all your previous solutions get better as well. Additionally, as the AI models are heading towards self-improvement, evals will later allow your agents to possibly even self-improve over time. However, at the same time, we found that SMBs or small and medium-sized businesses might not necessarily need the evals because small and medium-sized businesses don't have this consistent traffic of requests. It doesn't really matter for them whether the solution is 5% worse or not, because typically evals only provide incremental results. So you can get to 80% performance without evals, and then the last 20% is where the evals come in. So again, for SMBs, it doesn't matter as much because the traffic of requests is much smaller. They might only use the marketing agent one or a few times per day, so they can easily get away without evals at the beginning. But if you are working with a client who is a very large enterprise client, then definitely I recommend setting up evals from the very start. Key takeaway number 19. There are two types of agents you can make. The first one is agents and the second one is workflows. Yes, there are actually workflows, there are agentic workflows. I previously haven't really considered this type of an agent. I only focused on building agents for my framework, and currently we don't even support workflows at all. But what we found in our agency is that sometimes there are processes that are defined by gods. There are some processes where the steps are predetermined for you and where the exact sequence of steps needs to be followed every single time. However, the steps themselves can be agentic. So for example, if you're performing a lead research process, there are sometimes use cases where you need to send like 3 prompts to Google, and the prompts themselves are the same except maybe for a company name, and the agent must perform the search on the exact same websites for these companies. So in this case, you can actually combine standard workflows and automations with AI agents. You can have a workflow where each step is agentic, where it's not the whole system that's agentic, but the specific steps within that process that require agentic capabilities. Crew AI, for example, is a workflow platform where you send tasks to an agent, you simply hard code them and then you send them one by one. While my framework is fully agentic, meaning that there is no way for you to even send tasks. We did encounter a couple clients, it's a very minor percentage, but there are sometimes these clients that want to perform the process in the exact same way. And again, the steps are agentic. So for this, we will be releasing a workflows feature very soon. Which brings us to key takeaway number 20. Agents need to be adaptable on feedback. The whole point of building agents is that they need to be able to interact with their environment. And if your agents interact with the environment, but they can't get a consistent feedback from that environment, then guess what? They're going to be confused. So when building agents, make sure that you don't just add tools for these agents that allow them to modify their environment. Also make sure to add tools that allow them to analyze their own results and how the impact of the previous actions actually affected their environment. So for example, don't just build an agent that can only update a database. Even if your requirements do not specify this, make sure to still add a tool for this agent that can then read the database records to ensure that the task has been completed successfully. Which brings us to key takeaway number 21. Don't build around limitations. This is one of the biggest mistakes you can make. You need to build your agents with a stance that these models are going to be getting better and better. Like for example, in 2023 in our agency, we built a pretty complex system to avoid the context token limits, but then OpenAI released the 128K context model, and 2 months later, this system became obsolete. The same might happen in the future, where, like, for example, right now, OpenAI is releasing agents like Operator Agent, Deep Research Agent, and previously they also released RAG, which is file search. And by releasing these agentic capabilities, they actually made a lot of startups obsolete. Like, for example, before there were a ton of these chat with PDF apps, and even though they still made significant incomes in the beginning, now there are almost none of them. So make sure that you don't build these obvious general use cases. Like, I believe the next one might be software development. So don't spend, a year building a software developer agent if it's such an obvious use case that OpenAI might develop it themselves. Key takeaway number 22. Deploying agents is a lot harder than building them. So in our agency, we started from building agents using my framework, which we still use to this day, of course. But what we figured out shortly later on is that it would take us 2 to 3 days to build an agent, but then it would take us another 3 days to deploy it, which essentially means to integrate it into our clients' processes. And this is why we actually decided to build our own platform. So if you want to sign up for a waitlist, make sure to use the link below. It's the only platform that we would personally use for deploying agents, because no other platforms give us enough flexibility to actually do so in productions. Many of them were built before even agents were a thing, and many of them were simply shooting in the dark, simply jumping on this hype train and not even building something that they would use themselves. Key takeaway number 23. Waterfall projects don't work. In our agency, we only work on a subscription basis because agentic projects are too agile. You cannot scope agentic projects for 3 months because they constantly evolve. Whenever we start working with our clients, we frequently find more opportunities that we have not foreseen before. So you can start from one-time fees. It's always a pretty good way to get started, but later on, make sure you transition to a more agile service where you don't act just as an outsourced dev team for your client, but rather you work as their partner. Because the goal with agent development is always not to just build an agent, it's to automate a business, it's to provide value to your client. So make sure you have an agreement with your client where you can actually have enough room to do so. Key takeaway number 24. Include a human in a loop for mission-critical agents. Sometimes there are some agents where the margin for error is just so low that if the agent makes one action by mistake, you will not be able to reverse back the results. So for these agents, you need to first include a human in a loop. Like, for example, you don't want to spend $10,000 on a less than ideal marketing campaign, which is why in the previous video we included this human in a loop step where the client can actually review Facebook marketing campaigns in Notion first. Later on, when the agent is fully fine-tuned and when the client consistently approves every single marketing campaign, you can simply remove this step. Key takeaway number 25. 2025 is the year of vertical AI agents. Vertical AI agents are essentially agents that are specialized for a specific use case. Just like in B2B SaaS, the vertical agents are serving only a very specific type of a business customer. So the same principles apply. With B2B SaaS, it's much easier to scale. You can charge significantly higher pricing because you know your customer in and out. You can really fine-tune this agent to solve a very specific and a very valuable problem for a specific business. And this is what makes them so easy at the start. However, do not start from vertical agents right away. It's completely fine to build a few horizontal agents for the same industry that you plan to then scale in. And after you've built few of these agents, you will start to notice similarities between them. These similarities is what you can then turn into a vertical AI agent that can be productized and adopted for many different businesses in this industry. Key takeaway number 26. Agents don't replace people, they help businesses to scale. For the last key takeaway, I just wanted to say that we have never seen a business owner who would immediately start firing people after their business became more efficient. By automating businesses, we simply help business owners to think bigger. they think bigger, they scale faster, they achieve higher revenues, they have more profits, and most importantly, their employees can now focus on higher level things and tasks that they truly enjoy. So don't worry about agents replacing people. I believe that humanity will always find better things to do, which will ultimately lead us into the new age of abundance and prosperity. Thank you for watching. I will leave all of the videos I mentioned in the description, and don't forget to subscribe.